The Winchester repeater clicked as Zachary Cole chambered around, his weathered hand steady despite the dust storm approaching from the east. And when the woman stumbled into his camp near Apache Junction, Arizona, with blood on her dress and terror in her eyes, he knew his solitary days were about to end in the summer of 1878. She collapsed near his fire, her dark hair matted with sweat and grime, her breathing ragged. Zachary set the rifle down carefully and moved to her side, his boots crunching on the dry earth. The woman's eyes flickered open, revealing striking green irises that caught the firelight like gemstones. "Water," she gasped, her voice hoarse. He retrieved his canteen without hesitation, supporting her head as she drank. She was young, perhaps 23 or 24, with delicate features marred by exhaustion and fear. Her dress, once fine quality, was torn at the hem and stained with what he now saw was not entirely her own blood. "Easy now," Zachary said, his voice low and calm. At 28, he had seen enough trouble in the Arizona Territory to recognize it when it came stumbling into his campsite. "Take your time." She pulled back from the canteen, coughing slightly. Her eyes darted to the darkness beyond his fire, scanning the scrubland with obvious panic. "They'll come looking for me," she whispered, fear threading through every syllable. Zachary followed her gaze to the empty horizon, then turned back to study her face. Whatever she was running from had put genuine terror into her bones. He stood, retrieved his rifle, and checked the ammunition with practiced efficiency. The metallic sound of him loading rounds into the chamber seemed to catch her attention. "Then they'll find me first," he said simply. The woman stared at him, surprise momentarily overriding her fear. "You don't even know who they are. You don't know what I've done. Don't need to." Zachary settled back on his haunches, the rifle across his knees. "You came here running for your life. That's all I need to know." She studied him in the firelight, taking in his sun-bronzed face, the scar along his jawline, the steady way he held himself. "My name is Sarah Zimmerman," she said finally, "and the men following me will kill you without a second thought. Zachary Cole." He tipped his hat slightly. "And I've been killed at more times than I can count, still here." Despite everything, a ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Mr. Cole. Most folks settle on foolish." He poured coffee from the pot near the fire, handing her a tin cup. "You want to tell me what happened?" Sarah wrapped her hands around the cup, drawing warmth from it despite the desert heat. The night was falling fast, and with it came the characteristic chill of the Arizona high desert. She took a long breath, as if deciding how much to reveal. "I was engaged to be married," she began, her voice steadier now, "to a man named Marcus Hewitt. He owns half of Apache Junction, has his hands in every business from the saloons to the mining operations. I thought he was respectable, thought I was making a good match." Zachary waited, knowing there was more. He had heard of Hewitt, a man whose reputation stretched across the territory like a dark shadow. Rich, powerful, and rumored to have connections to several outlaw gangs that terrorized the smaller settlements. 3 days ago, I was at his ranch house, finalizing details for the wedding. I wandered into a room I shouldn't have, found correspondence he had hidden. Her hands tightened on the cup. "He's been running guns to hostile raiders, selling information about gold shipments to bandits. He's responsible for the deaths of at least 24 men, maybe more. Teamsters, miners, even a few lawmen who got too close. And he caught you reading his letters," Zachary surmised. "I wasn't careful enough. He came in, saw what I had in my hands." She closed her eyes briefly. "He smiled at me, Mr. Cole. Smiled and told me that it was unfortunate, but I had seen too much. He called for his men, told them to take me out to the desert and make sure I didn't come back. But you got away." His foreman, a man named Dutch, he had been kind to me during my visits to the ranch. When the others were distracted, he shoved a knife into my hands and told me to run. I heard gunfire behind me as I fled. I think Dutch is dead because of me. Her voice cracked on the last words. Zachary was quiet for a moment, processing the information. Marcus Hewitt was not a man to cross lightly. If what Sarah said was true, and he had no reason to doubt her, then Hewitt would send every gun he had to track her down. A witness to his criminal activities couldn't be allowed to live, especially not one who had been close enough to be his bride. "How many men did he send after you?" Zachary asked. "4 rode out immediately, but he'll send more when they don't come back quickly." She looked at him with those remarkable green eyes. "Please, Mr. Cole, I won't blame you if you want me to leave." "I have no right to bring this danger to your doorstep." He shook his head. "Already told you what I think about that. Besides, my doorstep is wherever I make camp. Not much to lose." He stood, scanning the darkness again. "They'll likely wait until dawn to track you. Desert's too dangerous at night and they'll want to see the trail clearly. We should move before first light." "Move where?" Sarah asked, rising on unsteady legs. "There's an old mission about 15 miles north of here, San Miguel. Been abandoned for years, but it's built like a fortress. Stone walls, good sight lines. If we're going to make a stand, that's the place to do it. Or I could just keep running," she suggested, though her voice held no conviction. "You'd last maybe 2 more days on foot in this heat, and that's if the men tracking you don't find you first." Zachary began breaking down his camp with efficient movements. "If you want to survive this, you need to trust me." Sarah watched him work, seeing the competence in every gesture. This was a man who knew the desert, who understood survival and danger. Against her better judgment, she felt a flicker of hope. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. "You could have just pointed me toward town and been done with it." Zachary paused in rolling up his bedroll, considering the question. "My sister was killed by men like Hewitt," he said finally. "Outlaws who thought they could take whatever they wanted. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I wasn't there to help her." He met Sarah's gaze directly. "I'm here now." The simple honesty in his words struck something deep in Sarah's chest. She nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. They worked together in silence, Zachary teaching her how to pack efficiently, how to move without leaving obvious signs. His horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Rust, accepted Sarah's presence with calm indifference. As the fire died to embers, Zachary scattered the ashes and covered the site. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Well enough." "Good, we'll share Rust for now. At dawn, we'll need to move fast." They settled in to wait out the remaining hours of darkness, Sarah wrapped in Zachary's spare blanket while he kept watch. Despite her exhaustion, she found sleep elusive. Every sound in the desert made her start. Every whisper of wind through the sage seemed like approaching footsteps. "Try to rest," Zachary said without turning from his vigil. "I'll wake you if trouble comes." "How can you be so calm?" Sarah asked. "Fear doesn't help anything. Either they find us or they don't. Being scared won't change it." He glanced back at her. "Besides, I'm not planning on letting them get close enough for it to matter." His confidence was almost contagious. Sarah closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe slowly. Gradually, exhaustion won out over anxiety, and she drifted into an uneasy sleep. She woke to Zachary's hand on her shoulder, his finger to his lips signaling silence. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, that peculiar gray before true dawn. He pointed to the south, where distant dust marked riders approaching. 4 of them, he whispered. "Right on schedule. We need to go now." They mounted Rust quickly, Sarah sitting in front with Zachary behind her, one arm around her waist to keep her steady. The horse moved out at a brisk trot, heading north through the awakening desert. The landscape was all twisted saguaro cacti and rocky outcroppings, painted in shades of purple and gold by the rising sun. Sarah could feel the solid warmth of Zachary behind her, the strength in his arm as he guided the horse. It should have felt awkward, this intimate proximity to a stranger, but instead she felt safer than she had in days. His presence was reassuring in a way she couldn't quite articulate. They rode hard for 2 hours, Zachary occasionally stopping to check their back trail. The dust cloud behind them had grown, confirming that the pursuit was real and determined. But Zachary seemed unconcerned, focused entirely on reaching their destination. The mission appeared like a mirage, its stone walls rising from the desert floor, weathered by decades of sun and wind. San Miguel had once been a thriving outpost of faith, but Apache raids and the shifting politics of the territory had led to its abandonment 20 years prior. Now it stood empty, a monument to failed dreams and faded hopes. Zachary guided Rust through the open gates into what had once been a courtyard. Dismounting, he helped Sarah down and began surveying their new stronghold with a tactical eye. The walls were intact, about 8 feet high and 2 feet thick. The main chapel still had most of its roof, and there was a bell tower that offered an excellent vantage point. "This will do," he said with satisfaction. He led Rust to what had been a stable area, where a trough still held rainwater from recent storms. "First thing, we need to see what resources we have." They explored together, finding the mission in better condition than expected. The thick adobe walls had weathered well, and several rooms were still serviceable. An old well in the courtyard, when tested, still produced clean water. Zachary's practiced eye cataloged everything that could be useful. "How long can we hold out here?" Sarah asked, standing in the chapel and looking up at the damaged ceiling where sunlight streamed through gaps. "Depends on how serious Hewitt is about silencing you." Zachary was checking the ammunition he carried. "I've got enough rounds for maybe 24 shots. After that, it gets creative. Those aren't good odds. Odds are never good in the desert. You make do with what you have." He looked at her thoughtfully. "You know how to shoot." "My father taught me when I was young. I'm not an expert, but I can hit what I aim at. Good enough." He handed her a Colt revolver from his saddlebag. 6 shots. Don't waste them." Sarah took the gun, feeling its weight in her hand. It had been years since she had held a weapon, but the basic familiarity came back quickly. Zachary watched her check the cylinder with approval. "You've done that before," he observed. "My father believed women should know how to protect themselves. My mother thought it was unladylike." Sarah smiled sadly. "I wish I had listened to him more." They spent the next hour fortifying their position. Zachary moved with purposeful efficiency, positioning water and supplies in the bell tower, creating sight lines through gaps in the walls. Sarah helped where she could, following his terse instructions. As they worked side by side, she found herself studying him. Zachary Cole was not a handsome man in the conventional sense. His face was too weathered, his features too harsh. But there was something compelling about him, a quiet strength that had nothing to do with physical prowess. He moved with absolute confidence, without wasted motion or unnecessary words. And his eyes, when they met hers, held a depth that suggested he had seen more of life than most men twice his age. "Tell me about your sister," Sarah said as they arranged supplies in the tower. Zachary was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, his voice low, he said, "Her name was Rebecca. She was 19 when she died, working as a schoolteacher in a mining camp near Tombstone. Raiders hit the camp looking for payroll from the mine. She was just there, trying to protect the children in her schoolhouse." They shot her when she wouldn't move aside. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, knowing the words were inadequate. "I was working a ranch 2 days' ride away. By the time I got word and reached the camp, they had already buried her." His jaw tightened. The raiders were never caught. "The law out here, it's thin as paper. Men like that, they do what they want and face no consequences." "Is that why you're helping me?" "Because of Rebecca, partly." He met her eyes. "But also because it's the right thing to do. Sometimes that's reason enough." They fell into silence, the weight of shared loss hanging between them. Sarah felt a connection forming, fragile as morning frost but real nonetheless. This man had suffered and survived, had chosen to help a stranger despite knowing the cost. She found herself drawn to him in ways that surprised her. The sun climbed higher, baking the desert and the old mission alike. They took shelter in the relative cool of the tower, watching the southern approaches. Around midday, the riders appeared. Zachary counted them through a gap in the stone. 6 now. Hewitt sent reinforcements. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. "Can we hold against that many? We're about to find out." He settled the rifle against his shoulder, sighting down the barrel. "Stay low and only shoot if they breach the walls. Make every shot count." The riders approached cautiously, spreading out as they neared the mission. They stopped about 200 yards out, conferring among themselves. Sarah could see their faces now, hard men with guns and bad intentions. She didn't recognize most of them, but the one in front, a tall man with a black duster, she knew. That was Frank Hardison, one of Hewitt's top enforcers, a man rumored to have killed a dozen people in cold blood. "Sarah Zimmerman," Hardison's voice carried across the desert. "We know you're in there. Come out peacefully and we'll make this quick." "That's not much of an offer," Zachary muttered. He raised his voice. "The lady's under my protection. Turn around and ride out while you still can." Hardison laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "And who the hell are you, cowboy? Some drifter playing hero? Mr. Hewitt wants the woman, and Mr. Hewitt gets what he wants. Hand her over and you can walk away." "Not happening," Zachary called back. "Last chance. Ride out." The response was a rifle shot that kicked up stone dust from the wall near Zachary's position. He ducked back reflexively, his expression hardening. "So much for negotiation," he said. He aimed carefully and fired. The sound was deafening in the confined space of the tower. One of the riders jerked and fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder. The others scattered, taking cover behind rocks and scrub. "That's one," Zachary said calmly, working the lever action to chamber another round. 5 more. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions, bullets striking the mission walls with sharp cracks. Sarah pressed herself against the stone, the revolver gripped tightly in both hands. This was real, she thought wildly. People were trying to kill her, and only one lone cowboy stood between her and death. Zachary fired twice more in quick succession, his aim calculated and precise. Sarah heard a scream followed by cursing. The return fire intensified, forcing them to take cover. "They're going to try to flank us," Zachary said, scanning the approaches. "Watch that eastern wall. Anyone comes over it, shoot them." Sarah moved to the position he indicated, her heart in her throat. Minutes stretched like hours as the battle settled into a tense standoff. The attackers probed the mission's defenses, trying to find weaknesses, while Zachary picked his shots carefully, making each bullet count. Then movement caught Sarah's eye. A man was scaling the eastern wall, using the rough stone as handholds. He was almost to the top, his face twisted with effort and malice. Sarah raised the revolver, her hand shaking. "Steady," she whispered to herself, remembering her father's patient voice. "Breathe and squeeze." She fired. The recoil jarred her arm, but the shot flew true. The man on the wall jerked and fell backward with a cry, disappearing from view. Sarah stared at the space where he had been, shocked at what she had done. "Good shot," Zachary said, glancing over. "You all right?" "I shot him," Sarah said numbly. "You survived, that's what matters." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Don't think about it now. Stay focused." She nodded, forcing down the nausea that threatened to overwhelm her. This was survival, she told herself. These men would have killed her without hesitation. She had done what was necessary. The attack continued through the afternoon, waves of gunfire interspersed with long silences. Zachary's ammunition dwindled steadily. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, he was down to his last few rounds. "We've hurt them," he said, assessing the situation. "Maybe killed 2, wounded at least 2 more, but they're not giving up." "What do we do?" Sarah asked. She had 2 bullets left in the revolver. Zachary was quiet, thinking. Then he smiled, a grim expression. "We wait for dark, then we turn the tables." As twilight fell over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the gunfire ceased. The surviving attackers had pulled back to regroup, confident that their quarry was trapped. Sarah and Zachary used the respite to drink water and eat jerky from his supplies. "You're planning something," Sarah observed, watching him prepare. "They think they have us pinned down. They'll wait for dawn, probably try to rush us when we're tired." Zachary checked his knife, a wicked blade worn smooth from use. "But we're not going to be here at dawn. You want to run." "I want to end this." His eyes were hard in the fading light. "We slip out in the dark, circle around, and take the fight to them. They won't expect it." "That's insane," Sarah said flatly. "You'll get us both killed. Maybe, or maybe we survive." He looked at her seriously. "I won't force you to come with me. You can stay here, stay hidden. I'll draw them away. And if they kill you, I'm alone in the desert with no horse and no supplies." Sarah shook her head. "We're in this together now, Mr. Cole. I'm not about to let you play the lone hero and die for my sake." Something flickered in Zachary's expression, surprise mixed with respect. "You're tougher than you look, Miss Zimmerman." "I've had to be these past few days." She managed a weak smile. "Besides, if we're going to do something crazy, might as well do it together." They waited until full darkness descended, the desert night alive with the sounds of insects and distant coyotes. The attackers' campfire was visible to the south, an orange glow that marked their position. Zachary studied it intently, counting silhouettes. 4 of them left, he murmured. "Maybe 5 if one's sleeping. Better odds than 6. They slipped out of the mission through a gap in the northern wall that Zachary had scouted earlier. Rust followed quietly, trained to silence. The desert night was cold, the temperature dropping rapidly after the scorching day. Sarah stayed close to Zachary as they circled wide around the mission, approaching the enemy camp from an unexpected angle. The closer they got, the more Sarah's heart pounded. She could hear voices now, men talking and laughing around their fire. They sounded confident, relaxed even. They had no idea death was stalking toward them through the darkness. Zachary stopped about 50 yards out, behind a large outcropping of rock. He handed Sarah Rust's reins and pointed to a position with clear sightlines to the camp. "Wait here," he whispered directly into her ear. "Count to 100. When you hear my first shot, start shooting. Aim for center mass, don't try to be fancy. Most importantly, stay down and stay quiet." "Where are you going?" Sarah whispered back, alarmed, to even the odds. Before she could protest, he melted into the darkness, moving with a silence that seemed impossible. Sarah counted, her hands slick with sweat despite the cold. At 100, she raised the revolver and sighted on the camp. She could see 4 men clearly now, and what looked like a 5th sleeping near the fire. They were passing a bottle around, discussing plans for the morning assault. Then chaos erupted. Zachary appeared at the edge of the firelight like a ghost, his knife flashing. The sleeping man never woke up. The others barely had time to register the threat before Zachary fired point-blank into the nearest one. Sarah opened fire as commanded, her shots cracking through the night. The camp dissolved into confusion and panic. Men dove for weapons, shouting and cursing. Sarah kept shooting, forcing them to keep their heads down. She saw Zachary grappling with one attacker, the two men a tangle of violent motion. Her gun clicked empty, and she watched helplessly as another man took aim at Zachary's back. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed a rock the size of her fist and threw it as hard as she could. It struck the gunman in the temple with a solid thunk, making him stagger. It was enough. Zachary broke free and fired his last round, dropping the man, then silence. The gunfire echoed away into the desert night, leaving only the crackle of the campfire and the sound of harsh breathing. Zachary stood amid the carnage, blood on his hands and shirt. Sarah couldn't tell how much of it was his. "Zachary," she ran forward, abandoning caution. "Are you hurt?" He turned to her and she saw the exhaustion in his face. "I'm all right, bruised but whole." He looked down at the bodies scattered around the camp. "It's done. They won't be going back to Hewitt." Sarah felt her legs give out, the adrenaline that had kept her moving suddenly draining away. She sat down hard, shaking uncontrollably. Zachary knelt beside her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "Breathe," he said quietly. "It's over. You're safe now." "I killed people," Sarah whispered. "We killed people. We survived. Those men made their choices when they agreed to hunt you down." His voice was firm. "Don't carry guilt for defending your life." They stayed like that for long minutes, Sarah gradually getting her shaking under control. Zachary retrieved supplies from the attacker's gear, including fresh ammunition, food, and 2 additional horses. When he returned, he found Sarah staring into the fire, her expression distant. "We should move," he said gently. "No point staying here." "Where do we go now?" Sarah asked. "Hewitt will send more men. Not if he doesn't know these ones failed." Zachary helped her to her feet. "And not if we make sure he has bigger problems to worry about." Sarah looked at him questioningly. In the firelight, his face was all sharp angles and determination. "Those letters you found," he continued. "If we could get them to the territorial marshal, Hewitt would hang. All his money and influence wouldn't save him from hard evidence of gun running and murder." "The letters are still at his ranch," Sarah said, understanding dawning. "You want to go back there. It's the last thing he'll expect, and with his best men dead out here, the ranch will be vulnerable." Zachary met her eyes. "But it's dangerous, maybe more dangerous than what we just did. I won't ask you to risk it." Sarah thought about Dutch, the foreman who had died giving her a chance to escape. She thought about all the other victims of Hewitt's greed, the families destroyed by his criminal enterprises. And she thought about the man standing before her who had risked everything to protect a stranger. "When do we leave?" she asked. They rode through the night, giving the mission a wide berth. Zachary navigated by the stars, his knowledge of the territory proving invaluable. Sarah rode one of the captured horses, a decent roan mare that responded well to her handling. As miles passed beneath their horses' hooves, she found herself watching Zachary's silhouette against the starlit sky. He was unlike any man she had known. Not polished or refined like the town society men who had courted her, not brutal and crude like the cowboys who worked the ranches. Zachary Cole existed in some space between civilization and wilderness, carrying the best qualities of both. He was educated enough to speak properly but practical enough to survive where others would perish. And beneath his weathered exterior, she sensed a deep well of integrity. "Tell me about yourself," Sarah said as they paused to rest the horses near dawn. "I know about Rebecca, but who is Zachary Cole?" He smiled slightly at that. Not much to tell. Born in Texas, raised on a ranch until my parents died of fever when I was 16. After that, I drifted. Worked cattle drives, did some prospecting, tried my hand at lawman work for a while. Why did you stop being a lawman? Too many rules that got in the way of justice. Out here, the law is what you make it. I decided I could do more good on my own terms. He looked at her. What about you? How does a woman like you end up engaged to a criminal? Sarah laughed bitterly. Naivety and poor judgment. My parents died 2 years ago, left me their house in Apache Junction, but not much else. I was trying to be practical, looking for a husband who could provide security. Marcus seemed perfect on paper. Wealthy, influential, respected in town. I ignored the signs that something was wrong. What signs? The way people looked at him with fear instead of respect. The hushed conversations that stopped when I entered a room. The fact that he always carried a gun, even to church. She shook her head. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. I wanted so badly for it to work out that I blinded myself to the truth. You were trying to survive, Zachary said. Can't fault yourself for that. But I can fault myself for not seeing clearer, for almost marrying a monster. She met his gaze. You saw the truth immediately, didn't you? The moment I told you about Hewitt, you believed me. I've met men like him. They leave a particular kind of stain on the world. He stood, preparing to move on. But you got away and you're fighting back now. That takes courage. As the sun rose, painting the desert in shades of gold and red, they approached the outskirts of Hewitt's ranch. The property was extensive, thousands of acres of grazing land surrounding a central compound of buildings. Zachary surveyed it from a ridge, noting the positions of guards and the layout of structures. The main house is there, Sarah said, pointing. Hewitt keeps his office on the second floor, east side. That's where I found the letters. How many men on the property normally? At least a dozen, maybe more. Ranch hands, guards, his personal staff. She bit her lip nervously. This is madness, Zachary. Even if we get inside, how do we get out? One step at a time. He studied the approach carefully. What time does Hewitt usually leave the house? Mid-morning, to oversee ranch operations. He's gone for hours sometimes. Zachary nodded slowly, a plan forming. Then we wait. We slip in during his absence, get the letters, and slip back out. Fast and quiet. They spent the morning hidden in the rocks, watching the ranch come to life below. True to Sarah's information, around 10 o'clock a group of riders departed, Hewitt's tall form visible among them. Zachary waited another 30 minutes, ensuring they were truly gone, then motioned to Sarah. Stay close and stay quiet. If anything goes wrong, run for the horses and don't look back. I'm not leaving you behind, Sarah said firmly. Stubborn woman, he muttered, but there was a hint of a smile in his voice. They approached the ranch buildings from the east, using the stable complex as cover. Sarah led the way, her knowledge of the layout invaluable. They encountered a single ranch hand, who Zachary subdued quietly before the man could raise an alarm. Inside the main house, the silence was eerie. Most of the staff was apparently occupied elsewhere. Sarah navigated the hallways with tense precision, leading Zachary up a grand staircase to the second floor. Hewitt's office door was locked, but Zachary made short work of it with his knife. Inside, the room was opulent, all dark wood and leather, the desk covered in paperwork. There, Sarah whispered, pointing to a locked drawer. That's where he kept the letters. Zachary forced the lock, revealing a stack of correspondence and documents. He scanned them quickly, his expression darkening. These are damning. Names, dates, amounts. This could bring down half a dozen criminal operations. He stuffed the papers inside his shirt. Let's go. They were halfway down the stairs when a woman's scream cut through the house. A maid stood in the hallway, staring at them in shock. Before either could react, she turned and ran, shouting for help. "Run!" Zachary grabbed Sarah's hand and they bolted for the front door. Men appeared from multiple directions, ranch hands and guards responding to the alarm. Zachary fired twice, dropping the closest pursuers. Then they were outside and sprinting for the horses. Bullets kicked up dust around their feet as they ran. Sarah's lungs burned, her legs pumping desperately. They reached the horses and mounted in one smooth motion, years of Western living making the action instinctive. More men poured from the buildings as they galloped away, but the distance was too great for accurate shooting. Within minutes, they had crested the ridge and dropped down the far side, out of sight and temporarily safe. They didn't slow until they were miles away, the horses lathered and blowing hard. Zachary finally called a halt in a narrow canyon, both of them breathless and shaking from adrenaline. "That was too close," Sarah gasped, "but we got them." Zachary patted the papers inside his shirt. "Now we just need to get these to Tucson, to the territorial marshal. Hewitt will come after us himself now. He'll know we have the evidence. Let him come. We have what we need to destroy him." Zachary looked at her seriously. "But you're right that we need to move fast. Tucson is 3 days' ride. We don't stop except to rest the horses." The journey to Tucson became a blur of long hours in the saddle, brief snatches of sleep, and constant vigilance. They traveled mostly at night, using the cooler temperatures and cover of darkness to their advantage. Zachary proved to be an excellent guide, knowing water sources and safe camping spots that kept them ahead of any pursuit. During the quiet moments, usually when they paused to rest, Sarah and Zachary talked. She learned about his dreams of one day owning a small ranch, somewhere peaceful where he could raise horses. He learned about her love of reading, her secret aspirations to one day write stories of her own. They discovered shared values and unexpected humor in each other, the foundation of friendship forming beneath the more immediate concerns of survival. On the second night, camped in a grove of cottonwoods near a spring, Sarah watched Zachary tend the horses with his characteristic efficiency. The moonlight caught the planes of his face, and she felt something shift in her chest. This man had saved her life multiple times, had risked everything for her without asking for anything in return. But more than that, he saw her. Not as a prize to be won or a burden to be managed, but as a person of worth and capability. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked, catching her gaze. "That I was going to marry the wrong man," Sarah said honestly, "and that I'm grateful I didn't." He moved to sit beside her, their shoulders nearly touching. "Hewitt would have made you miserable. It's not just about avoiding misery, it's about finding something real." She turned to face him. "These past few days, running for my life, I've felt more alive than I have in years." "Is that strange?" "Not strange. You've been tested and found you're stronger than you knew." His voice was quiet. "You're an impressive woman, Sarah Zimmerman. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You found the evidence. You chose to run instead of staying silent. You fought beside me when it mattered." He met her eyes. "I just helped clear the path." The air between them seemed charged with possibility. Sarah found herself leaning closer, drawn by forces she didn't entirely understand. Zachary's hand came up to cup her cheek, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "This is probably a bad idea," he murmured. "Probably," Sarah agreed. Then they were kissing, tentative at first, then with growing passion. Sarah's hands found his shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him. Zachary pulled her closer, one arm wrapping around her waist. The kiss deepened, all the fear and adrenaline of the past days transmuting into something else entirely. When they finally broke apart, Both were breathing hard. Zachary rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "That was unexpected," he said, "but not unwelcome," Sarah asked softly. "Definitely not unwelcome." He pulled back to look at her properly. "But Sarah, I don't want to take advantage. You've been through hell. Your emotions are probably all over the place." "My emotions are exactly where they should be." She took his hand, holding it firmly. "I know what I'm feeling, Zachary. I'm not some confused girl. I'm a woman who has seen you at your best and your worst, who trusts you with her life. And I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the desert air, brave and vulnerable. Zachary stared at her, something like wonder crossing his weathered features. "I don't have much to offer," he said finally. "A drifter's life, whatever I can scrape together. You deserve better. I deserve someone who sees me as an equal. Someone who fights beside me instead of treating me like porcelain. Someone who makes me feel safe and challenged and alive all at once." Sarah smiled. "That sounds a lot like you to me." Zachary kissed her again, gentler this time, full of promise and possibility. When they settled down to sleep, it was together, Sarah's head resting on his shoulder as he kept watch. For the first time since her flight from Hewitt's ranch, she felt truly at peace. They reached Tucson in the late afternoon of the third day, dusty and exhausted but triumphant. The town was larger than Apache Junction, a genuine city with brick buildings and actual streets. The territorial marshal's office was located near the center of town, a stolid structure that radiated authority. Marshal Thomas Brennan was a grizzled veteran in his 50s, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He listened to their story with growing interest, examining the documents they provided with increasing attention. "This is quite a tale," he said finally, "and quite a collection of evidence. If this is authentic, Marcus Hewitt is finished." "It's authentic," Sarah said firmly. "I saw him conducting business. I know where the guns were stored. I can testify to all of it." Brennan nodded slowly. "That will help. But understand, Miss Zimmerman, this won't be easy. Hewitt has friends, powerful ones. Bringing him down will mean a very public trial, and you'll have to tell your story in court, under oath, with his lawyers trying to discredit you." "I'll do whatever it takes," Sarah said without hesitation. "And you, Mr. Cole, what's your stake in this?" "I'm just making sure she gets justice," Zachary said simply. Brennan studied them both shrewdly. "Well, I'll need to verify this information, send deputies to investigate. In the meantime, you two should stay in Tucson where it's safe. I'll assign some men to watch over you. Make sure Hewitt doesn't try anything foolish." They took rooms at a hotel near the marshal's office, separate but adjoining. After days in the desert, the luxury of a real bed and hot bath felt almost decadent. Sarah soaked until her skin pruned, washing away the grime and blood of their ordeal. When she emerged, dressed in a simple cotton dress purchased from the general store, she felt almost human again. A knock at the adjoining door announced Zachary's presence. He had also cleaned up, his hair still damp, his face freshly shaved. Without the layer of trail dust, he looked younger, more approachable. Sarah found herself staring. "You clean up nice," she said with a smile. "You too." He seemed uncertain, hovering in the doorway. "I thought maybe we could get dinner, if you're not too tired." "I'm exhausted," Sarah admitted, "but I'd love to have dinner with you." They found a small restaurant down the street, nothing fancy but clean and welcoming. Over plates of beef and potatoes, they talked about everything except the past week. Sarah shared stories of growing up in Missouri, the daughter of a shopkeeper who had dreamed of Western expansion. Zachary spoke of his childhood in Texas, learning to ride before he could properly walk, the wide horizons that had shaped his entire worldview. "What will you do?" Sarah asked as they finished their meal. "After all this is over?" Zachary was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about that. All those plans I had about a ranch somewhere quiet, they seem different now. Different how? Lonelier. He met her gaze directly. I've gotten used to having a partner, someone to watch my back and challenge my thinking, someone who makes even running for our lives feel like an adventure. Sarah's heart beat faster. I've been thinking along similar lines. I had this whole life planned out, very respectable and proper. Now it seems impossibly dull. What does seem interesting to you? Zachary asked. Building something real. Not based on social expectations or financial security, but on genuine connection. She reached across the table, taking his hand. I want a life that matters with someone who matters to me. Sarah, I have to ask, is this real? Or is this just the intensity of what we've been through, making you think you feel something that might not last? She squeezed his hand firmly. I've asked myself the same question, and here's what I know. Yes, the past week has been intense and overwhelming. But what I feel for you isn't born from fear or adrenaline. It comes from seeing who you truly are. Your integrity, your courage, your kindness, even in the darkest moments. That's not going to change when life gets quiet again. Zachary smiled, genuine and warm. I love you, Sarah Zimmerman. I think I have since you threw that rock to save my life back at the camp. I love you too, Zachary Cole, stubborn, heroic, impossible man that you are. They spent the evening walking the streets of Tucson, hand in hand like any courting couple. The difference was that they had already been tested in ways most people never experienced. Their bond was forged in fire and survival, making it stronger than conventional romance. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Marshal Brennan's deputies verified the information in Hewitt's letters, conducting raids that uncovered caches of stolen weapons and documented evidence of his criminal network. Hewitt himself was arrested trying to flee to Mexico, his empire crumbling around him. The trial became a sensation throughout the territory. Sarah testified for 2 full days, recounting everything she had witnessed and discovered. Hewitt's lawyers tried to paint her as a scorned woman making false accusations, but the physical evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Marcus Hewitt was sentenced to hang. Sarah felt no joy at the news, only a grim satisfaction that justice had been served. She attended the execution, standing beside Zachary as the man who had tried to kill her met his end. It was closure, final and irrevocable. In the aftermath, Sarah found herself an unexpected celebrity. Newspapers across the territory ran stories about the brave woman who had brought down a criminal empire. Several publishers even approached her about writing a book about her experiences. She declined politely, wanting only to move forward with her life. What now? Zachary asked as they sat on the hotel balcony one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Now we figure out what comes next, Sarah said. Together. I've been looking at properties, Zachary admitted. Small ranches within a day's ride of Tucson. Nothing too isolated, but enough land to make a go of it. Horse breeding, maybe some cattle. That sounds perfect. Sarah leaned against his shoulder, though I have one condition. What's that? We get married first. I'm not moving to a ranch with you without making an honest man of you first. Zachary laughed, pulling her close. Is that a proposal, Miss Zimmerman? It absolutely is. So what do you say, Mr. Cole? Will you marry me? Yes, he said simply. Absolutely yes. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the Tucson courthouse. Marshal Brennan gave Sarah away, having become a friend during the long weeks of the trial. A handful of townsfolk attended, people who had followed their story and wanted to witness its happy ending. It was simple and perfect, everything a wedding should be. The property they purchased was 30 miles south of Tucson, a modest spread with good water and better grazing land. The house needed work, but it was solid and had potential. They spent their first months together making it a home, working side by side to repair fences and outbuildings, to break horses and negotiate deals with local ranchers. It was hard work, harder than anything Sarah had done in her previous life, but she loved it. She loved the physicality of ranch work, the satisfaction of seeing tangible results from her efforts. Most of all, she loved building this new life with Zachary, creating something entirely their own. Their first winter together was cold and difficult, testing them in new ways. They learned to work through disagreements, to balance independence with partnership. There were arguments and frustrations, moments when the isolation wore on both of them. But through it all, their love deepened, evolving from the intense passion of their first days into something more enduring. Spring brought renewal and growth. The horse breeding operation began to show promise, with several successful sales to ranches across the territory. Sarah discovered she had a talent for handling the financial aspects of the business, keeping meticulous records and negotiating contracts. Zachary focused on the training and breeding, his natural way with animals proving invaluable. On a warm evening in late May, almost exactly a year after their first meeting, Sarah found Zachary working in the barn. She leaned against the stall door, watching him brush down a young colt with patient, rhythmic strokes. "I have news," she said quietly. Something in her tone made him look up immediately, concern flickering across his face. "What kind of news?" "The good kind." She smiled, one hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Zachary stared at her for a long moment, the brush forgotten in his hand. Then he crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, pulling her into his arms. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Sarah, that's incredible. Are you feeling all right? Do you need to sit down? Should we call the doctor?" She laughed at his sudden nervousness. "I'm fine. I saw the doctor in town yesterday. He says I'm healthy and the baby should come in December, near Christmas. A Christmas baby." Zachary cupped her face in his hands, kissing her gently. "I love you so much. I love you too." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, Sarah maintaining her ranch duties with only minor modifications as her body changed. Zachary became almost comically protective, constantly worrying about her overexerting herself. They transformed one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and building furniture by hand. Winter returned to the Arizona territory, bringing crisp nights and occasional frost. On December 20th, during a cold snap that had ice forming in the water troughs, Sarah went into labor. Zachary rode like a demon to fetch the midwife from the nearest settlement, returning in record time to find Sarah walking circles around the house, her face set with determination. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Zachary stayed by Sarah's side the entire time, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement. When their son finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, both parents were exhausted and overjoyed. "He's perfect," Sarah whispered, cradling the baby against her chest. "He has your eyes," Zachary said softly, running one finger along their son's tiny cheek. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names endlessly during the pregnancy, considering family names and meaningful options. But looking at their son, Sarah knew exactly what felt right. "Andrew," she said. "Andrew Thomas Cole, after my father and Marshall Brennan." "Andrew Thomas Cole," Zachary repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Welcome to the world, Andrew." The baby years were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Andrew proved to be a healthy, happy child with his mother's curiosity and his father's calm temperament. The ranch continued to grow, their reputation for quality horses spreading throughout the territory. They hired additional hands to help with the work, allowing Sarah more time with their son while still maintaining her role in running the business. When Andrew was 2 years old, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter arrived on a warm spring morning with minimal fuss. They named her Rebecca, honoring Zachary's sister. She had dark hair and her father's serious expression, even as an infant. Life settled into a rhythm of work and family, challenges and triumphs. They added on to the house as the children grew, creating more space and modernizing where possible. The ranch became prosperous enough that they could afford small luxuries, though neither of them lost their practical nature or work ethic. The years passed with surprising speed. Andrew grew into a tall, serious boy who showed his father's natural affinity for horses. Rebecca was her mother's daughter, bright and inquisitive, constantly asking questions and wanting to understand how everything worked. They were a family, complete and happy, built on the foundation of that desperate night when a terrified woman had stumbled into a cowboy's camp. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary and Sarah rode out to the ridge where they had first surveyed Hewitt's ranch all those years ago. The view hadn't changed much, but they certainly had. Both were older now, marked by the passage of time and hard work. But the connection between them remained as strong as ever. "You ever regret it?" Zachary asked, his arm around her waist as they watched the sunset. "The life you could have had if you'd stayed in town, married someone respectable." "Not for a single second," Sarah said firmly. "That life would have been comfortable but empty. This life with you, it's real. Every struggle and triumph, we've faced them together. Our children are growing up knowing what it means to work hard and care deeply. I wouldn't trade that for anything." "I feel the same way." He kissed her temple gently. "You saved me, you know. Before you stumbled into my camp, I was just drifting, existing, but not really living. You gave me purpose." "You saved me first," Sarah reminded him, "literally and figuratively. You showed me what it means to be truly seen and valued, not for what I could provide, but for who I am." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the Arizona sky turn from gold to purple to deep blue. In the distance, they could see the lights of their ranch house, where their children waited. It was home, built by their own hands and filled with genuine love. "They'll come looking for me," Sarah said suddenly. Repeating the words she had spoken that first night, Zachary smiled, pulling her closer. "Then they'll find me first," he completed. "And they did find us both. Found us and forged us into something stronger than either of us could have been alone." Sarah turned in his arms, kissing him with all the passion and tenderness of a decade together. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "Let's go home," she said. They rode back as the stars emerged, toward the lights and laughter of their family. Behind them, the desert stretched vast and indifferent, witness to countless stories of survival and loss. But theirs was a story of triumph, of two people who had faced the worst the frontier could offer and emerged not just intact, but better than before. In the years that followed, the Cole Ranch became a landmark in the territory. Their horses were sought after across Arizona and beyond, known for their quality and temperament. Andrew eventually took over much of the daily operations, proving to be a natural horseman and businessman. Rebecca surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, opening a small school on the ranch property for the children of their workers and nearby homesteaders. Zachary and Sarah aged together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. They became grandparents, watching with pride as their children built families of their own. On quiet evenings, they would sit on their porch and remember that desperate night that had brought them together, marveling at how far they had come. When Zachary passed away at the age of 72, peacefully in his sleep after a full day of working with the horses he loved, Sarah grieved deeply, but without bitterness. They had been given 44 years together, years filled with more love and adventure than most people experienced in twice that time. She lived another 5 years after his death, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, writing down the story of their lives so that future generations would know where they came from. Sarah's manuscript, carefully preserved by Rebecca, told the truth of that summer in 1878 when a terrified woman and a solitary cowboy had found each other in the desert. It spoke of courage and love, of justice and redemption. Most importantly, it spoke of the power of two people choosing to stand together against overwhelming odds. The Cole family ranch continued for generations, each successive owner knowing the story of how it began. They would point to the ridge where Zachary and Sarah had first committed to fighting together, to the house that had sheltered so much love and life. The story became legend, passed down with pride and reverence. In the end, what had started with fear and violence had transformed into something beautiful and enduring. Sarah and Zachary had built not just a ranch, but a legacy of love and partnership that would outlast them both. They had proven that even in the harsh crucible of the Wild West, genuine connection and courage could create miracles. Their story became a testament to the idea that sometimes the most important moments in life arrive unexpectedly, disguised as danger or disaster. That night when Sarah had stumbled into Zachary's camp, both of their lives had changed forever. He had been looking for purpose, she had been running for her life. What they found was each other, and that made all the difference. The desert that had witnessed their first meeting remained unchanged, indifferent to human drama. But the lives touched by Sarah and Zachary's love story numbered in the hundreds. Their children and grandchildren carried forward the values they had instilled, of integrity and courage, of standing up for what was right regardless of the cost. The ranch they built became a place of safety and prosperity, employing dozens and supporting countless families over the decades. In the quiet moments before Sarah herself passed away, surrounded by family in the house she and Zachary had made together, she thought back to that terrified young woman running through the desert. She smiled, remembering the cowboy who had stood between her and death without hesitation. They had saved each other in every way that mattered, creating a life that exceeded both of their wildest dreams. The sun set over the Arizona territory, as it had for millions of years before, and would for millions more to come. But for one perfect lifetime, it had illuminated a love story worth remembering, a testament to the enduring power of courage, commitment, and choosing to stand together no matter what darkness might be pursuing. Sarah and Zachary Cole had lived and loved fully, leaving behind a legacy that would never be forgotten by those who came after. Their story ended as all stories must, but the impact of their choices rippled forward through time, touching lives they would never meet. And somewhere in the desert night, if you listened carefully, you might still hear the echo of a frightened woman's voice saying, "They'll come looking for me," followed by the steady response of a cowboy loading his rifle. "Then they'll find me first." Those words had become a promise, and they had kept that promise until the very end, together always.